Chapter 8. The Pressure of Rage. The barrage of blood had done little to slow down the giant king behind the concrete and marble wall. Hirian pulled himself out from behind his shield and found his enemy in front of him. Rayleigh stood still facing Hirian, his eyes glazed over, the air filled with iron as if the moon wore a shade of blood. Walker continued to fire off projectiles. Each blood lance he ripped from the fallen giants exploded outward on impact, shattering Rayleigh's armor and piercing his skin, the nutrients of the blood helping his muscles to recover. Rivers of blood formed, filling the square up to Rayleigh's calves. He stayed motionless as his body worked to repair the damage he had taken. The remains of the Lestrygonian army reached Hirian, closing ranks around him. They made a wall between their king and remaining forces, and Rayleigh. Entering the central area of the city, the Kura clan plugged the only exit from the square. Rows of horsemen filled the northern passages. Clearing out the edges of the square, Yoshi and Berlin stopped to catch their breath.
Bear, the kid gives the impression he's doing well.
Yoshi reeled his chained sickles in from a Lestrygonian corpse.
Something's wrong with him, though,
Berlin said as he slammed his mace down with force, shaking the blood free of the head.
The air reeks of rot. We should be careful going into the square.
Berlin smashed the mace into a concrete light post. The heavy weapon rested as Berlin took in more of the surroundings. Walker continued his assault on the giant's leader, while Rayleigh continued to rest idly in the middle of the battlefield, enthralled by the veil, unable to move. Watching the action, Berlin and Yoshi weighed the benefits of charging into the square.
Looks like Walker is up to his old calculating tricks. That guy would sacrifice his own family if it meant an advantage.
Berlin rubbed the blood from his face.
Man, he always lets loose in bloodbaths, and we have to contain the fallout.
Yoshi, looking to the south, caught a glimpse of the forces there.
Tyreen and Rama are up to something too. They probably sense a change coming in the battle. They both have a feel for those things.
I remember, we should watch for an opportunity, my friend.
Yoshi replied as he closed his eyes and took in a big breath.
We need to watch the Cures as well. They're planning something too.
Berlin hefted his mace. The wolf shed was finally cleaned of the crusted blood and entrails.
We shouldn't worry about that too much. Let's help out in the square.
What do you have in mind?
Wedge break, and create an opening for Rayleigh.
Gripping the weapon's handle, he took a giant step forward, watching the barricade of earth and bodies surrounding Hirian. The two men struggled to keep balance as the ground beneath them rumbled. Berlin pointed to the horde with an oversized arm.
I guess we take that as our cue.
He raised his mace, rallying the soldiers behind him, and with broad movements rushed into the square, leading his men into an engagement with Hirian's reinforcements. His mace connecting with the bodies of giants, Berlin cleared a path through the colossal army. Exploding with strength, the half-giant shattered bone armor and exposed the bare flesh beneath. Sensing an opportunity, Yoshi twirled the chain blades around his body, rotating, creating momentum with his spinning blade. Tearing muscle from bone, he followed Berlin, and working in tandem they crippled Hirian's reinforcements. Lewis had regained enough strength to get to his feet. He forced himself up to look out at the battlefield. Whistling, he summoned one of the mountless horses in the area. Waking up with a bit more energy, Lilith jumped to her feet. Remembering that she was in a war zone and seeing Lewis, she moved over to him sluggishly. He waited, leaning against the horse. The animal's hot breath ruffled his hair. He mounted with Lilith's help and headed into the Forenza cavalry, making his way to the front.
Tyreen,
he cried out as he approached his commander. Tyreen turned at his name, surprised to see Lewis balanced atop the horse. Lilith's magic gripped his limp body in place.
Louis, you look like shit,
he said with a relieved smile.
Welser I can't feel my legs and I'm quite sur my line is punctured. Lilith is heading into the square. She plans on supporting Releg from afar.
Is she crazy?
Rama interjected.
That soldier is unstable, and as far as we can tell, he sees everyone as an enemy.
Lilith has an idea, sir. I know you're planning something, but before you make a decision, please hear it.
What's she thinking of, son?
Tyreen asked, as he continued to look Lewis over.
Lilith is going to gather Walker, Yoshi, Berlin, and Kramer and whittle down the Giant King's army.
We can provide support with the remaining armies,
Rama responded.
She plans to use extensive manipulation. You should avoid entering the square. Her mass elemental energies are too dynamic. If she loses concentration or gets overwhelmed an anomalous could form, wiping the whole town off the map. Let's not interfere with the conflict in the center of the town. Let's focus on dealing with the enemies around us.
Leaving Rayleigh to fight alone? Are you crazy?
Rama demanded.
One man can't survive an onslaught like that.
Sir, I don't know what's going on with Rayleigh, but he is more than capable, and it seems like he's been evolving during the fight. He resembles a demon and is growing stronger and more dominant as the fight continues. Besides, if we get too close, he'll probably kill us.
Tyreen turned to Rama.
If our orders are to save as much of the town as possible, we should create an escape route for the Lestrygonians, bait them out of the city. Once they are fleeing, we pick off those we can.
Rama nodded thoughtfully.
Make it clear, but not obvious. Make it look like a mistake.
Tyreen, remembering something, answered.
We should force them north. The church built an old fort we can trap them in.
Agreeing to the plan, Rama called over his squad commanders and passed on absolute orders not to enter the square even by accident. A crimson moon smothered in black clouds consumed the dark energy saturating the air, spreading chaotic power across the sky. Lightning and fire encircled the square, and danced off the lake of blood. Rayleigh's eyes were opening, growing with anger, hatred fueling every fiber and every muscle. He jerked upward from a bent-over position as if waking from a dream and screamed out a war cry, straining his throat and stunning the enemies near him. In the blink of an eye, Rayleigh absorbed the blood, healing himself entirely. Caught off guard, Walker backed out of the square, his attention on Rayleigh as the other man absorbed blood and rejuvenated his body. Lowering his head and analyzing what was in front of him, Rayleigh sent the remaining blood exploding in every direction in a wave of aerial spikes. It erupted outward in every direction, booming and disorienting, slowing the giant's actions and those of the nearby Forenza forces. Rayleigh's loud war cries brought everyone around him trembling to their knees. Lightning crackled through the air and fell into the square, the iron in the blood acting as a conduit, piercing combatants on both sides as thunder ruptured their eardrums. Rayleigh dashed forward explosively, covering the distance to Hirion in an instant and rendering the fortification useless. With grandiose swings, he cut down Hirion's soldiers, weakening the wall around the resting king while dodging attacks from left and right. An explosion of blood caused giant pearls of crimson liquid to rain from the sky. The front guard was shredded by sword attacks ripping bone and flesh from their bodies. Like shrapnel, the debris of bodies tore through the second row of defense, setting off a chain reaction of body fluid and bone through every person in the perimeter. Hirion's eyes widened as the rest of his soldiers transformed into blood, bone, and flesh. Shaking off his shock, Hirion took a step back from Rayleigh. He slipped as his foot caught a dismembered arm, and stumbled backward looking for an escape. Rayleigh absorbed some residual blood, healing the damage he'd taken from the exploding corpses. Fully recovered and bursting with vigor, he took a step forward. Hirion retreated quickly as Rayleigh's cold red eyes fixed on him. Appearing behind Walker, Lilith began fortifying herself, using elemental manipulation on her own body. She covered her skin in a thin mud-like substance as durable as steel, and then used by lightning to increase her speed.
You're planning something reckless, Lilith. You're acting strange.
Rayleigh's rage started when I was injured outside of the town. If I hadn't been unconscious, he wouldn't have had to push himself so hard. I could have given our forces proper support. Rayleigh's eaten up a lot of our enemy's resources, but I need to quell his anger before it grows too strong and he turns on us.
I don't know how he has blood control. Still, his abilities surpass anything I ever imagined. His connection to the Veil must be immensely strong. You need to be careful if you approach him.
I enhanced my speed and durability. I'm going to create a box, trapping the giant's leader and Rayleigh inside. It won't hold them forever, but it might let us subdue Rayleigh if things end quickly. If we're lucky, we'll kill the enemy general and end this soon.
A thick blanket of fog fell upon the city. The air grew heavier, and the tension affected the Forenza soldiers. A silent whisper of blood and iron carried across the town square. Rama raised his hand and flashed silent orders to his men. The cavalry formed into two columns and rode off to the west and east, surrounding the square and killing off isolated giants as they pushed into position. Slowly bringing his arm down, and taking the reins of his warhorse, Rama felt the hair on his neck stand up. There was an unscratchable itch in the back of his throat. He moved his head to the right, just avoiding a blood spike screaming through the air right at him. He drew his curved blade. "Stay together, do not falter, keep moving forward," he said, doing his best to keep his men from becoming collateral damage to Rayleigh and Hirian's slugfest. Giant shadows continued to sneak through the northern wood. Hirian's reinforcements made their way down the mountainside and through the caves, long spears tied to their backs, sneaking around the Kura cavalry to enter the city through a guarded back alley. Killing the lookouts, they worked their way south until they reached the town square. Ravina moved into an advantageous position and peered into the courtyard to see the surroundings and the forces securing the square. Stepping forward with long flowing dirty blonde hair, eyes as blue as the sky. Her muscles tightened as she saw her people's bodies littered across the courtyard. Noticing the Kura cavalry to the east, she stepped back into concealment. She hugged the alley wall and returned to the spear women she'd arrived with.
Ravine.
A smaller-than-average Lestragonian spear sister approached the captain.
Speak, Kalirina.
Ravina pushed back her flowing, dirty blonde hair behind her shoulders and looked at the other with sharpened and focused eyes.
Cavalry is heading toward us from the south. Our sisters are in position and will engage at any moment.
Easy. Fall in line, we're going to get our king out of the square.
She adjusted her leather cuirasses and gripped her iron-tipped bone spears, preparing to leap in and slaughter the unsuspecting horse riders. She gave the order, and half her detachment engaged. Expecting an attack, the Kura leader ordered half his cavalry to face north and prepare for an incoming spell.
Aim. Snipers don't leave anyone alive. The order echoed through the alley and adjacent streets.
When it reached her ears, Ravina gripped her spear and charged into the square, avoiding the bodies of her clansmen. Her soldiers followed, till they reached Hirian. Beaten down and worn out from a fight for the first time. Stunned, she ordered her spearwomen to make a barricade of half-exploded corpses and other materials. They quickly set up a small wall of bodies between their king and the panting monster in front of them. She felt a sudden chill run down her bones. Goosebumps spread across her skin. She continued throwing bodies anywhere she could create speed bumps. The rest of her squad grabbed their exhausted king and pulled back into the northern alley. Sensing a growing threat and seeing the distance growing between himself and Hirian, Rayleigh, reinvigorated, moving with enthusiasm, he stalked forward. His inner energy leaked out, dissolving the nearby corpses, stealing their blood, healing the damage as he continued into each heavy spear head-on without caring. He picked up his pace and started sprinting, speeding up with every step, and finally burst out into the plains. Carrying her leader, Ravina was making good progress retreating north. A moment of panic seized her as the enraged enemy moved toward her and the king. She was moving through the thick of the bodies in an attempt to slow down her pursuer. Making his way up out of the city, Rayleigh closed the distance across the littered battlefield, absorbing the bodies planted by the clashing armies.
Ladies of the spear, lay down your life for our king,
Ravina bellowed. She reached the hardened giant warriors, and the Hellion spear sisters exploded forward in an attempt to slow down Rayleigh's pursuit. He dodged the incoming projectiles instinctively and pushed on towards his target, his subconscious driving him to end the fight with Hirian. His speed continued to increase till he flashed ahead looking like he was teleporting. A wind wall intercepted the airborne weapons, cutting their speed in half. As giants turned their backs and fled from combat, Ravina's words cut into them.
You will sacrifice yourself for the king's retreat, or you will die by my spear.
The Amazonian-like women kept up the attack, slowing down Hirian's pursuers and creating enough distance to let Ravina carry off her useless king. Through the blood of their people, Ravina and Hirian made it out of the forest to the north. She willed herself to carry the king onward, deep into the ghoul-ridden plains. The darklings could detect Ravina's fatigue and were drawn toward her. Alert and focused, the giant woman was driven by the ghouls to an astonishing speed. When she stopped to let air into her lungs, she felt Hirian move, causing her to lose her grip. Grunting, she dropped his body. She growled, disgusted at herself. Lestragonian society did not tolerate failure. Leadership was intended for the strong, to propagate their race. Ravina's ears picked up movements in the golden grass. She reached down, seized Hirian, and carried him deeper into the bleached fields. Choosing to hold their ground, the giant women turned and ready for combat. Some engaged Rayleigh directly while others in the back continued to throw spears. Dodging all the attacks as if seeing them before they happened, he ignored the women and moved past them. He took a deep breath. The earthiness of Hyrion's scent lingered in the air, and he pressed on, seeing everyone else as irrelevant. Rayleigh reached out to a shadowy figment of Hyrion as his body gave out once more. The enormous toll on his body continued to grow, and he felt sharp pains as the power within depleted. He fell to the ground face first. Seeing an opportunity, two spear sisters dashed out to strike. As their spears closed in, they exploded. Lilith had made her way through the forest and reached Rayleigh's muddied body. The spears came in contact with the strong wind she made from circulating natural energy. Molding a wall of wind, Lilith created duplicate spears of wind and fired them back, piercing the giant women and ripping off their skin with the force of a hurricane. She pulled Rayleigh up to herself, keeping the man from drowning in the sodden earth, and turned him over, wiping his face and freeing him to take deep breaths of fresh air.
You've turned into quite a wild card. If we survive this, perhaps I should ally myself with you to solve a personal problem down the road.
Rayleigh's body had all but shut down, but he began to breathe more deeply. As his muscles tore and rebuilt themselves, he screamed out suddenly in pain.
You're like a machine upgrading yourself to be faster and more capable. I hope that all the pain doesn't drive you insane. With all that adrenaline pumping through you, it wouldn't be surprising if you've already suffered some mental degradation. But if you can survive this, I could sure use your strength.
Resting a hand on his chest, she felt every fluctuation as Rayleigh continued to fight for breath. Overcome with emotion, Lilith gave in to her feelings, amplifying her magic. She conjured up the raw power of the wind, and the speed of the air picked up. Then she tapped into the dark energies she learned to harness from her master. The wind took on a red hue and traveled outward, incapacitating the Lestrygonians still in the area, ripping flesh from bone in a tornado of elemental power. The wind ripped trees from the forest, splintering the wood. She willed the air forward, clearing a path ahead. Lilith allowed herself to be free for the first time. She poured all her feelings into the manipulation, releasing her full reserves of arcanum, and the energy added to the tornado's force like a never-ending battery. Her spell fully charged, she relaxed her body and began drawing an arcanum again to store for later use. She felt the energy within her, and became enveloped in it. Her stamina slowly began to replenish, restoring her mental acuity. She looked over Rayleigh's body and not seeing any physical injuries, she injected some of the arcanum she had gathered into him, trying to restore his mind. Raising her head, she scanned the battlefield. Cries of terror echoed off the trees, making her shiver. The air had grown colder, and a brisk early evening breeze carried through the forest toward the city. The sound of horses reverberated through the ground from behind her. Lilith stayed low to the ground, gripping Rayleigh tightly, sharing the warmth of her body. Her eyes grew heavy, and it was getting hard to stay awake. Rayleigh jerked up once and then went limp, falling back down into her arms. She could feel the spasms in his muscles as the nanomachines continued to do their repairs and improvements. They lay silent in the woods. Lilith kept reminding herself that they were still in danger to keep from falling asleep. She probed the area, using the wind to enhance her senses and detect changes in the air and find the life force of any organisms around her.